going on, guys? It's Luke. I got a little bit of an ownership reaction video for you guys for the 2021 Open Championship. We're going to be going through my top 3 fades and sleeper picks for this week's event. My fades are going to be the guys that are being a little bit overhyped this week. My sleepers, of course, the guys being a little bit overlooked. We will be implementing my data-based approach on this channel as always. I use an analytical approach that I've learned as an electrical engineer throughout the years. I use a lot of techniques, tools, visualizations that I've learned as an engineer to help take on daily fantasy sports. I don't just cover the PGA Tour though, I also cover the NFL, NBA, UFC, and more. So if you're looking for even more database content, just make sure to check out my channel for more. On top of my video content, I also have a Patreon page that I launched. It's just $1 for the month. You get access to my projections for all players in every PGA Tour field, including this week's Open Championship. On top of my projections, I provide ownership projections, game theory notes, and more to come over the next few weeks. I'm going to have a lineup builder. I'm going to have even more tools. I'm going to have course fit models, all that fun stuff that I use for my lineups, and I'm going to give to you guys to make your own lineups and all that. So get in there. It's only $1 right now. It's a great value. But with all that out of the way, let's hop into the top 3 fades and sleeper picks for this week's event. Kicking off my fades, we have Patrick Cantlay coming in at $8,900 and projected to be owned in almost 24% of lineups at 23.75%. He's going to be a start of a trend for my fades here of volatile drivers of the golf ball. Guys that may gain strokes off the tee, but they do it in a little bit of a volatile way. If we take a look at Patrick Cantlay specifically over the last 32 rounds, he's been great with his finishes. He has a win to boot when Jon Rahm had the whole COVID fiasco, but he's only hit 56.9% of fairways. Like I said before, he's gaining off the tee. It's a little bit deceiving, especially when you see he's just hit over half of his fairways. At Royal St. George's, you have the severe fescue rough just outside the fairways. You also have a ton of pop bunkers that are extremely severe, extremely penal. If you're only hitting 56.9% of fairways, that is not going to get the job done at Royal St. George's. You're going to be losing strokes just because you hit it into so many hazards. On top of that, I have a huge problem with his lack of experience at the Open. Believe it or not, Patrick Cantlay's only played in 2 Open championships. That was back in 2019 and back in 2018. And while he does have a 12th place finish on his record, if we take a look at who's done well at the Open Championship, specifically the winners over the past 10 years, they've had an average of 9.5 starts at the Open Championship before winning. So Patrick Cantlay in just his 3rd start is very unlikely to go out to win or anything like that. And at $8,900 and almost 24% ownership, he's going to go out there and have to win to make it worth it. So he's just somebody who I would have been more comfortable owning right around 10-15%, but out in the 25, maybe even 30% ownership ranges, he's a very clear fade for me at the Open. At number 2, we have Justin Thomas, who is an absolute sweetheart of mine when it comes to DFS, one of my favorite players as well. But at $9,600 and 16.25% ownership, it's just not going to be worth it to me, especially considering he has the same problems off the tee as Patrick Cantlay. I'd actually say it's even worse. He's only hitting 52.67% of fairways over the last 32 rounds. And from the eye test, it actually could be worse than that. JT, when he misses, tends to hit really big misses, big sweeping hooks, big slices and whatnot. And at Royal St. George's, that's going to be a huge problem. Like I mentioned before, you have the fescue rough out there, you have some pop bunkers, some really just long wild grass as well. So if you're missing long, you're missing like Bryson does left to right, you're going to get a lot of penalty strokes. And if he's not, so the only way I could see him getting over this would be for him to club down, or hit irons off the tee, maybe even 3-wood from time to time. But Justin Thomas doesn't seem to like to do that. We even saw it at the Players Championship. Granted, he was able to win that week. He had everything working, but he was still hitting drivers off the tee. A lot of his competitors were hitting 3-woods. They were still getting the job done. And at Royal St. George's, I don't see him having too much success, especially if you look at his putting. He's losing 0.4 strokes per round putting the ball. That's going to put a lot of pressure on his ball striking. He's going to have to be absolutely immaculate with his irons to get the job done. At 16.25% ownership, he's my 7th highest owned golfer on the slate. I just have a lot more options than the 9K range I'd rather go to. People that are better putters, people that have just the same around the green game. And the off the tee volatility is something I'm trying to avoid this week at Royal St. George's. And finally, at number 1, we have Brooks Koepka, a $10,700 golfer expected to be owned in 24.85% of lineups. That's a ton of lineups. He comes in at number 1 in my projected ownership, and he's a very dangerous fade, but definitely one I'm definitely making at the Open Championship. So Brooks is coming in red hot. That's why he's getting so much steam in terms of ownership. He has 3 top 5 finishes out of his last 5 starts, but during that stretch, he's only hit 56.43% of fairways. So it's just like JT, just like Patrick Cantlay. He's doing it with a volatile driver, just bombing it out there, gouging it into greens. But at Royal St. George's, that's not going to work. Like I mentioned before, if you're missing the fairways, you're getting into a lot of trouble. And not only that for Brooks Koepka, I have a lot of problems with his around the green game. He's been losing of late around the green. He's never been an elite around the green player. And at Royal St. George's, you are bound to run into trouble. These greens have tons of undulations, tons of runoffs. Again, the pot bunkers you're going to have to hit out of, try to hit decent bunker shots out of. And Brooks Koepka, that's where he struggles. That's where he, gets himself into trouble, especially in regular PGA Tour events. He doesn't have the same focus. He'll hit bad around the green shots from time to time. And at Royal St. George's, you can't get away with that. You essentially have to have the magic beans around the green. You have to be somebody who's a wizard. And Brooks Koepka, that's just not what he relies on. He's a brute. He's somebody who's a very good ball striker. Can get hot from the putter from time to time. But at Royal St. George's, I don't think he's a great skill set. He's being wildly overowned, in my opinion. And for all those reasons, he's a fade for me this week. And now hopping into the sleeper picks. At number 3, we have Jason Day, a $7,700 golfer being owned in 6.5% of lineups. And he's somebody who's had a resurrection of his career of late and somebody I'm willing to buy in on, hoping I'm a little bit early to the party. So speaking of those great finishes, he had a 10th place finish at the Travelers Championship, a 14th at the Rocket Mortgage Classic. And if we take a look at his statistics, a deeper dive into them proves that it's not just fool's gold. He's done really well off the tee of late, gaining 0.57 strokes off the tee and 0.51 strokes around the green over the last 32 rounds. So those include missed cuts, a few bad events as well. So to see him playing that well despite those performances is great to see. He's surprisingly not been the best putter of late. He's been losing 0.15 strokes per round putting over the last 32 rounds. And that's not something that we usually see from him, though. Historically, somebody who gains a relatively lot of strokes putting. Last year, he gained 0.4 strokes per round putting. So I think there's a little bit of positive regression due for him. And at just 6.5% ownership, he's one of the lowest 3 owned golfers in the high 7K range. A lot of the chalk is in that range just because people want to avoid the 6Ks, want to especially avoid the low 6Ks. The 8K range isn't as strong as it typically is. And as a result, Jason Day is one of the lower owned golfers. So he's actually going to provide a relative high amount of leverage, even at 6.5% ownership. And he's somebody that I'm planting my flag in as a sleeper pick for the 2021 Open Championship. And now for my number 2 sleeper, we have Justin Rose, an $8,000 golfer expected to be owned in a few more lineups at just 7.5%. And again, he's somebody who I expected to be much higher owned than 7.5%. Justin Rose has been a fixture of the Open for quite some time. He has quite a few good finishes, and he has a perfect skill set to take on most of the venues that host the event. His combination of precision ball striking, he's got an absolute world-class putter, and that's how you get the job done at Royal St. George's. While he hasn't posted better than an 8th place finish at the Open Championship, at least his last 4 times out, he's been rolling his rock like no other, especially this season. He's getting 0.68 strokes per round putting, and that's over the last 32 rounds, which is one of the best in the field. It's top 5. He's also even better when you put him on the bent grass surface. So over his entire career, he gains an extra 0.42 strokes per round on the bent grass surface. So if we take a look, obviously if he putts even better than he has been of late, he's going to be gaining over 1.1 strokes per round with the flat stick. Again, he's been relatively accurate off the tee. He's been hitting 60.97% of fairways. That's above average. He's been right around average when it comes to shots gained. He's also been gaining on approach, gaining 0.15 strokes per round on approach. So I really like how his game fits the golf course. I think he's been coming in scorching hot with the putter. He absolutely loves the bent grass surface. The icing on the cake here is how clutch he's been in majors. He's finished in the top 25 a whopping 65% of the time over the last 3 years. So somebody who steps up his game when the stakes are the highest, has the flat stick working, loves the bent grass surface. His distance isn't going to kill him this week either. There's going to be a lot of spring in the fairway. As long as he's accurate and is hitting the short grass, he's going to get the job done. And I'm going to be way over the field this week at 7.5% ownership. And finally, for my number one sleeper pick, this is somebody who we've had problems of late. It's Webb Simpson at $8,300. He's only expected to be owned in 8.25% of lineups. And I mentioned when he had problems because he WD'd from the Wells Fargo Championship and cost me a ton of money. And I know it wasn't just me. He was owned around 20% that week. So there were a ton of people who were killed by Webb Simpson. He's also had a really bad stretch of form since the Wells Fargo WD. On top of that, he's missed the cut at the Rocket Mortgage. He missed it at the U.S. Open. The best finish that he had over the last 2 months was the 30th place at the PGA Championship. So one would wonder why he'd want to play Webb Simpson. It's a little bit of a gamble this week, but I'm expecting him to return to form. I haven't seen Webb priced in the low 8K range for over 2 years now, ever since he broke through with a win there in 2017. And if you take a look at his game of late, he's priced around guys who are much worse golfers than he is. He's usually owned about 15% of the time, again, usually in the high 9K range. And we take a look at how he's done statistically on the year, it's really not as bad as everyone thinks it is. He's hitting 63.95% of fairways over the last 32 rounds, which is good enough to have him gaining off the tee. He's also been somebody who's been very well with his irons. He's gaining 0.38 strokes per round on approach, which is lower than his historical baseline, so I do expect him to regress positively in that category. But where he really makes his hay is with his short game. He gains 0.99 strokes per round with his short game, so pretty much a stroke per round with his short game, which is one of the best in the world. It's top 5 for this field over the last 32 rounds. And because of that, he's a great course fit. Again, he's just like Justin Rose. He's somebody who's not very long off the tee, somebody who hits more fairways than his competitors do. And as a result, he's going to get rewarded there. I also think that the around the green and short game is going to pay huge dividends in the 8K range. He's somebody who has legit winning upside. We've seen him win the U.S. Open before. And the U.S. Open is not a venue that really fits Webb's game. So, if you look at the Open Championship, it's much more suited for Webb Simpson. So for him to come in at $8,300 at just 8% ownership, it's ridiculous to me. People are going to take a look at the last 2 months, just think that he's fallen off as a golfer. The guy had neck problems. The guy had some knee problems. He's in his high 30s at this point. You're going to have health issues. You're going to have to take time off. You're going to have a slump month or two. I'm buying in on that historical form from. I think he's a foundational piece in my lineups this week. I'm going to have him in the 30 to 40% range. I think he has really good top 5 equity. Maybe not the best win equity, just because I think there's some guys that have better win equity, like Jordan Spieth, Patrick Reed, for example. But I definitely think he has a good shot at top 5ing. That's it, guys, for my ownership reaction for the 2021 Open Championship. Let me know in the comments who your favorite sleeper pick is this week for a chance to win my PGA projections for free on Patreon. I'm also going to have videos covering the UFC fights for this weekend. I'm going to have my positional rankings out, my QB rankings for fantasy football, as well as my game theory video coming out this Friday. So stay tuned for all those videos. There's even more content coming out for all of you guys. Thanks for watching. As always, make sure to like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the content. It really helps me with growing the channel. It also makes sure that you guys can catch my content as soon as I post it in the future, so it's a win-win. I'm trying to make this something I can do full-time so that I can focus all of my efforts on all the different sports to give you guys the best content possible. So supporting my channel would really help me out with that. Good luck with your lineups this weekend, guys. Make sure to comment if you guys have any questions with the player pool. I'll be answering questions all day, all night for you guys, so make sure to leave them if you have any. So with that being said, I'll see you guys next time.